Hello everybody and welcome back to Watching Walford. I'm Ash and today I posed the question: does Coronation Street still have too many deadweight characters? Now, this isn't supposed to come from a place of hate, but it's to come from a point of discussion. Coronation Street is probably the soap that has the most long-running characters that it's had, at least within 5-10 years. A lot of characters been there 20, 30 years. Helen Worth, 40, 50 years. But, point being, they keep a lot of the long-running cast on, but they don't typically give them much to do. Like how EastEnders, well, you have Phil, Ian, Sharon. Kathy doesn't really count because she died. Kat, Alfie, kind of. You have those characters who are still the characters, but they don't do as much anymore. But the difference with Coronation Street is they don't seem to put them in as prominent positions, which makes it more of a question is that if they are necessary. Like with the recent news of Sue Cleaver leaving as Eileen Grimshaw, with Helen Worth leaving lately, Lisa, what's her last name? Sutherland, leaving recently. Two characters who still have been on the show for quite a long time are still there. Now, it's an interesting thing to kind of pose the long-running characters and whether they actually somewhat still hold strong at this point in time. Because obviously you have the icons that still bring that history, that legacy to the show that you wouldn't really get rid of in any scenario, like Ken, Rita, Audrey, Sally to an extent, Roy. Who else? Who else is a part of the older cast? Is that it? But yeah, you have these sorts of older characters who they mostly spend time just talking to each other, but they have been there for many, many years. And then you have the kind of in-between characters. You have Maria, you have Sally, Kevin, Nick, kind of character-wise, has been there for a long period of time, blah, blah, blah. Jenny, Leanne, Toya, then you get Tyrone, Fizz, Sarah, Todd, if you count it, Sean, Chesney. And you have the kind of middling characters who have been there for a long period of time, but aren't necessarily used in the same frame as a whole. So this experiment is kind of interesting to say, do they overuse these fairly overplayed characters? Like Maria had a storyline last year, but fundamentally everybody is fed up of Maria, let's be honest. Everybody's sick of Maria. Nobody's particularly interested in seeing what she does, even though she acted the bullying storyline really well. She did just play the role of agonizing mum, but reasonable in that situation. Fizz, Tyrone hardly ever get a storyline of their own. Mostly just hanging around dealing with Cassie and Evelyn's business. Leanne and Toya, still two characters who are fairly prominent and still get their storylines. So, I think it's less bad than it has been. I will say, some of the exits recently have been cutting the weight as a whole. But it's the question, you do need these characters to further the stories. And when they do occasionally get a storyline, like Tyrone, for example, you generally knock it out the fucking park. My favourite Coronation Street storyline ever is the Kirsty Soames Tyrone abuse, domestic abuse storyline. I think it's great. I think it's elevated those characters, had a great group of characters to bounce off, that being Tyrone, Tina, Tommy, Kirsty, Fizz, a great cast of characters and a really important showing of what they wanted. Yeah, Tracy, even then, so Steve, etc., etc. You have all these David, you have all these characters who were already I don't know. Because some people argue about Coronation Street having a lot of dead weight, and I didn't necessarily reach a conclusion before I started this video, which, probably a bit of a red flag, but I thought it was a fairly interesting one to go into, because ultimately, I don't necessarily think they have a problem with too many older characters. I think people did kind of have a bit of mismanagement. But, Debbie's dying. A lot of the older characters are kind of on their ways out, but they still don't really do the same. And, obviously, you're not gonna give the Barbara Knoxes, the Ken, the Audreys, you're not really gonna give them as big of storylines at this point because they've had their day. But even then, do you really just want to Gaelify them anyways? These characters have status; they can't really just not do anything. They know they know who their characters are. They played their characters for many years now. They're probably gonna tell the writers yo, I'm not fucking doing that. They probably have the status to do that. Then you have the Kirks, the Marias, the Tyrones, the Fizz. It's just interesting because you have these characters who are supposed to be building the next generations of characters. But sometimes they never really fully make that transition. Craig, for example. Craig has never really made that transition into being a main character in a sense. Yes, he had the OCD storyline and the Bethany grooming storyline, but quite like Bethany, probably her better years have been behind her for the extended period of time. I don't know, honestly. Honestly, I can't tell if I think the cast is too bloated. Yeah, sure, there are characters that may not be the most interesting, like Yasmin, Stu before now. Kirk is token comic relief, which, yeah, sure, he kind of does well. Sean, who is there to be there, and I don't know what he's got on the soap bosses. I will say Sean's gotten much better over the last, couple years. They've actually somewhat made the character a character rather than a caricature, if you will. But still, it was the introduction. Him without Dylan is fucking pointless at this stage. It's important to have that there. But I am generally expecting a big shake-up as well, because then is George going to stay? Is Glenda going to stay? It feels like Glenda's going to be a long-running character for however long until the actress decides to leave. They seem to be very smitten with Glenda. You have Michael. You have the Winter Browns, which I'd get rid of. Hot take. Probably not a hot take. I'd get rid of, personally. I respect that you want to show, especially in the current climate, in the current financial crisis, that you want to show that people are under the thumb and under the fucking push. You want to show that people are struggling, but I really don't like Gemma, Chesney, Bernie. I kind of like Ches, but Ches is fucking wet lettuce, isn't he? He's boring as fuck. When Chesney goes up the aisle, he plays Canon and D and thinks it's a fucking innovative choice, You tell me he's got 10 fingers, he's gonna fucking be like, but where's me thumbs? I've got 12 fingers. Ches, stop. Right, none of those landed. Those were shit. Just moving on. Just not draw any attention to that. But and the new characters as well. A lot of new characters were introduced, but they never really stick. I feel like a problem with Coronation Street in this last period of time is, and I suppose, yeah, an issue with these characters in general is it's very stop-start, and it's very, we're going to break something up for the sake of it, rather than breaking something up for a genuine reason. When Dee Dee broke up with Joel, that made sense. But when Asha and Nina broke up for reasons, they were going to go with Lauren and Bobby for a while, but they then decided Lauren and Max, so Sabrina had to go. Steve and Cassie had a thing for like a minute, and then they opted to go against it. Obviously, there were storyline reasons for that, but like, you know, the current show has a problem with trying to. They build out this big story, and then they just shelve it afterwards. Like the Daisy and Brian relationship. What's the point in getting invested in relationships anymore if in the end you're just going to break them up in a really like, oh, they got together. Oh, yeah, well, you've had your fun now. Fucking move on. Like, no, but we were actually invested in this couple. But they just weren't the flavor of the month. Now, obviously, this will be different with Lisa and Carla, but still, it's probably not going to be a very easy road to climb. But I will say, having read a bunch of stuff, and I'll fully reiterate, I've not watched the 6th episode. I've not watched the 6th of January episode, but I will be aiming to watch it and do a video on it as and when I get to it. But hearing what's happened with a certain Mason, yeah, I am feeling a lot more confident in Coronation Street, and I feel like this era will be defined by its shock decisions. And shock decisions it may be, I'm quite surprised they went the way they did, which I'm not going to spoil here, but I will talk about very soon. I think the bold choices and the shocking axes are actually going to define this era, because ultimately too many characters have been dying, have been like living out on their past like honors. They are like, yeah, sure, Kirk is great. Does Kirk deserve 10 more years on the show? Probably fucking not, honestly. Like, has he done enough to warrant it? I don't really think so. So ultimately, it's just a weird one. But I don't think it's as bad as they think. I don't think the cast is as bloated as people emphasize. I don't think that's the problem, because at any point in time you can call on these actors and they'll do a good job. You can call on Kevin, he'll do a good job. You can call on Abby, she'll do a good job. You can call on Sally, she'll do a really good job. So I think ultimately, for my conclusion for this video, I don't think Coronation Street has a deadweight cast problem. I think that would be ignoring what some of the problems were, which, you know, some of the problems were not treating the characters with the kind of decency they deserved. A lot of the older characters became Gail Platt in the last period of time. Which, you know, isn't really what you want, because you want these characters to be well-defined and have their own motivations, but ultimately if they're all just sat there being like, bloody hell, what's a fucking iPhone? Oh, for fuck's sake, it's 2024, 2025 now, man. So, yeah, as a conclusion, I don't think there's a deadweight problem in the cast of Coronation Street. I think it's one of the shows that fundamentally didn't kill off a lot of its mainstays, and leaves the door more open to some than it probably should. But that's not a bad sign, because you look at EastEnders, for example, and you'd fucking love to be able to bring Ronnie and Roxy back, but they're dead. You'd fucking love to bring back Abby Brannon, they're dead. Michael Moon, dead. Derek Branning, dead. All these characters you would love to fucking bring back, they're dead and buried, and you can't fucking return to it, even if you have a really good storyline idea for that character. Other than killing off a bunch of, like, kids' mums and the gays, which Coronation Street is fucking criminal for. They do tend to keep up with the older characters, allowing them to flourish and not really need to be, you know, stripped away, or, we're going to do this really big storyline. So, I think that's to its credit. And if this immediate shock decision is anything to be said, I think that Coronation Street, as much as I begrudged it in my Coronation Street's not looking good for 2025 video, I will say the first move they nailed, and I'll talk about that in another video. Yes, Do you think Coronation Street has a dead weight character problem? Tell me in the comment section down below. I've been Ash from Watching Walford. Thank you for watching. Join me in the next one. See you then. Bye-bye. Oh, yeah, and I'll probably do that Coronation Street weekly roundup thing on Friday, if I had to guess. So be kind of prepared for that. All right, see yas.